How much would you ignore to feel loved? How far would you go to feel needed? Hello everyone. My name is Falcon and welcome to What Am I Watching? Today I want to talk about something that completely caught me off guard. A 25-minute anime called The Little Spider Girl. And if you hear that title, you're probably expecting something ridiculous. Maybe cute. Maybe weird. Maybe just another fantasy anime trying to coast entirely off the novelty of the monster girl aesthetic. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But this short film, oh no, it does something far more interesting than that. Because underneath the fantasy, underneath the horror, underneath the spider legs and the unsettling atmosphere, there's an incredibly human story hiding underneath it. A story about loneliness. A story about starvation. Emotional starvation. About the terrifying things that people become willing to justify once they feel understood by someone, even if that someone is a monster. So turn off the lights and stay a while. Let's learn a few things together, shall we? Before we get into spoiler territory, let me briefly explain what The Little Spider Girl actually is. At its core, the story follows a lonely librarian who encounters a strange creature disguised as a young girl. From there, the anime slowly develops into something that feels strangely difficult to categorize. It's horror, but it's also emotional drama. And fantasy, don't forget about fantasy. But it feels grounded in a way that many dramas fail to achieve. And most importantly, it understands restraint. That may sound like a strange compliment, but restraint has become incredibly rare in modern storytelling. Especially modern fantasy horror. Everything now feels obsessed with explanation. Every monster needs lore. Every ghost needs a tragic backstory. Every mystery needs to be dissected until nothing mysterious remains. Nothing is allowed to simply exist anymore. And horror suffers because of that. This anime gives you enough information to emotionally understand what's happening, while still leaving enough uncertainty for the horror to linger afterwards. That balance, it's incredibly difficult to pull off. And this short film somehow manages this in under half an hour. What surprised me the most wasn't the horror. It was how emotionally believable the relationships between characters felt, because this story could have very easily become shallow fantasy nonsense. Instead, every interaction feels painfully human, especially the librarian. At first glance, he seems passive, quiet, and harmless. But the movie slowly reveals something much sadder about him. He's starving, emotionally starving. And loneliness is one of the most dangerous emotions that horror can exploit. Not fear, loneliness. Because loneliness changes how people rationalize things. It changes what they become willing to tolerate. And the anime never clearly or directly explains this to you. It simply shows you. And that's what makes the writing strong. Look at the difference between the relationship with his schoolgirl friend and the relationship with the spider girl. This distinction is incredibly important, because the librarian doesn't really care about the schoolgirl at all. It's nice having her around. He helps her out financially, or her family at least. He listens to her. There's a genuine kindness there. But there's also an emotional distance. Their relationship is rooted in responsibility, routine. She represents ordinary human connection. But the Spider Girl, she represents something completely different. Need, dependency, intimacy. She doesn't just interact with him, she sees him. And for someone emotionally isolated long enough, that becomes intoxicating. That's why the story becomes so uncomfortable. Because the librarian is never choosing between good and evil. He's choosing between normalcy and emotional fulfillment. And that's a much, much more human conflict. A scarier one, too. People rarely destroy themselves out of hatred. No, most of the time, they do it because they desperately want to feel less alone. And that's why the final sacrifice works so well. Not because it's shocking. It is shocking. But no, it works because emotionally it feels inevitable. The anime spends its entire time quietly showing you the librarian slip deeper into emotional dependency. So, when the schoolgirl is sacrificed, the horror isn't, how could we allow this? The horror is the part of you that understands exactly why he does. It's not because he hates her, he doesn't. But the Spider Girl fulfills something inside of his ordinary life that she never could. And that realization becomes deeply disturbing, because suddenly, the story stops being about monsters, and it starts becoming about emotional selfishness. The librarian understands the cost. He understands exactly what happened, and he accepts it. Because losing the Spider Girl? Oh, well, that feels worse to him than the moral horror of what just occurred. That's devastating. And then the anime delivers what I think is the single best scene in the entire story. A scene that lasts maybe 2 seconds. Near the end, our librarian visits an older one. Earlier in the story, this older man tried to warn him, tried to intervene, even tried to stop him from heading down this path. At first, it almost feels like the older librarian represents morality, like he understands the danger. Then something happens. Tea is ready, and briefly, very briefly, we see that the older librarian is also living with a creature of his very own. And the moment the younger librarian notices this, they exchange a look. That's it. No dramatic reveal, no exposition dump, no speech explaining what's happening, just recognition. I love it. It's brilliant. Because in less than 5 seconds, the anime quietly reveals its entire overview. The older librarian understands exactly what the younger man has become, because he already became that person himself years ago. And suddenly, his earlier warnings feel completely different. He wasn't speaking as a morally superior figure. He was speaking as someone who already lost the same battle. And now, there's this silent understanding between the two of them. A kind of exhausted acceptance. If I couldn't stop myself, I can't stop you either. That scene is so incredible because it trusts the audience. Again, most modern stories would ruin this moment by explaining it. This movie simply lets the silence do all the work. And silence is powerful when writers know how to use it. And I think that's ultimately why The Little Spider Girl affected me so much. Not because it's shocking and not because it's disturbing. Not because it has a twist, but because underneath the fantasy, it understands people. It understands how loneliness erodes morality slowly instead of all at once. It understands how emotional dependency can become more important than ethics. Almost like a drug, an addiction. And most importantly, it understands that monsters become infinitely more frightening once they stop feeling fictional. The Spider Girl works because she doesn't feel like a metaphor. At first, she feels real, emotionally real. And that emotional realism makes everything else hurt even more. Even the ending. It doesn't feel cruel, not in the traditional sense. It feels tragic, quietly tragic. Like watching someone willingly walk towards something destructive because for the first time in their lives, they feel needed. And maybe that's why this short little film lingered with me so long afterwards. Because beneath the horror, it reveals something deeply uncomfortable about human beings. Sometimes, people knowingly accept terrible things, if it means they no longer have to feel alone. And that idea feels far more terrifying than the monsters themselves. If you've watched this far, then chances are you enjoy horror that lingers a little longer than most. And The Little Spider Girl absolutely does this. There's a link in the description below where you can watch it for free. I want to thank you all for making it this far into the video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, because this channel, it's one of those stories. It doesn't just end, it sits with you. We talk about things that are worth talking about, and maybe we learned something together along the way. Thank you all for listening tonight. Stay safe out there, and don't bring anything home that you shouldn't. I hope to see all of you in the next video. Because the librarian doesn't care about the schoolgirl. Oh, sorry, Nugget. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drop that on you. Yeah. You okay? Okay. I think I'm still recording. Okay. It understands that monsters become... What do they become, Aku? What do they become? They become cute little demons that live with you forever. For anyone that doesn't know, my dog's name is Akuma. So, there's a joke there for you. Where was I? And that idea feels more terrifying. Oh, Long Johnson. Yeah, this is me. This is me when it's late and I need sleep.